Good evening, everyone. I'm Roger Casey, and as president of McDaniel College, it's my privilege to welcome you to our second Smart Talk of the academic year. Through this program, we're able to highlight the McDaniel brand of liberal arts education at work through the achievements of some very impressive alumni. And many of these same alumni connect with you, our current students, through our Center for Experience and Opportunity, offering career expertise, mentoring, networking, internships, and jobs. And if you haven't had a chance to meet the staff of the CEO on your way in, they are stationed just by the main door. Wave back there, Aaron. And go see Aaron and learn more about many ways that you can get involved and connected with our alumni base or the community through the CEO. And afterwards, we want to invite you to a light reception and an opportunity to continue the conversation with our featured guest. We've got some punch and cookies and all back here in the back, so please hang around afterwards for some conversation. Tonight, we welcome back to campus a proud member of the class of 1972, Jim Wilberger, who jetted here from LA earlier this week with his daughter Carmen, and it's great to see you here tonight too. We're delighted to be hosting you. For a Hollywood movie producer of 80 movies, miniseries, and television movies whose career and life are centered on the West Coast, Jim has spent a lot of time in recent years on this campus. For the past several years, he's dedicated at least 1 week to guest lecturing and meeting personally with our students in the communication and cinema department, offering them his insider's guidance on careers in the film industry. And he's made a practice of hiring up to 2 summer interns to work in LA, where they get experience working with different departments on a movie set, from camera to production to props. And we applaud you and we thank you for your commitment to ensuring that McDaniel students are gaining vital experience in their field before they graduate from here. So Jim is currently the head of production at Mission Pictures International, and over the course of his career, he has produced for the Hallmark Channel, TNT, Hulu, Lifetime, Ion, and Pixel Networks, including such titles as Annie's Point, Frankenstein, and Enchanted Christmas. As vice president of production for Turner Network Television for 10 years, he was the in-house producer of Ted Turner's passion projects, large budget, often historical dramas, including The Day Lincoln Was Shot and James Dean. And he was, of course, the producer of Turner Pictures' Gettysburg, and production executive for Door to Door, winner of 6 Emmys, including the Best Movie for Television. Jim's put together a reel featuring some excerpts from his movies. And we're going to start with that, but without further ado, let me bring Jim up so that he can introduce his reel and then a few thoughts, and we'll have a conversation over here based on your questions. So please welcome Jim Wilberger. Jim?
Thank you, everyone, for coming out. I'm just really happy to see everybody here tonight. Roger, thank you so much for inviting me. And special thanks to Kim Ash, who put this event together. I really appreciate it. I'm not going to speak right now, really, other than to say, in my business, you really need to see the goods, right? So it's better that you see a few clips from some of the movies I've worked on in the past, and then I'll come back up and we can talk about it a little bit.
I was dead broke. It didn't matter. I was home.
Off the stage, let's go. Next 5 numbers, 120 through 124. Shut up! Shut up! I want to see those numbers. I want to see them today. 123, 120, 124. Today. Thank you.
Smoke? Yeah. Thanks, man.
What's your name?
I can't decide.
What are your choices?
Well, I got James Dean, Jimmy Dean, or Byron Dean.
Which one's your real name?
James. Byron's my middle name.
Go with your real name.
You think?
I know. Jimmy's an 8-year-old boy, and Byron's a dead poet with a club foot.
And James is king. What's your name?
Martin Landau.
Where are you from?
Why, you want to come home and meet my mom?
Yeah, can you cook?
You like matzo ball soup?
My favorite.
You're invited. Where you living?
Some dirt hole, rented room.
Let's go, fellas. 125 through 129. You're up.
What number you got?
231.
I'm 216. Let's cut out, man. Cattle calls are for losers.
Yeah?
Unless you got an agent sending you in, you're kidding yourself.
All right. The other way.
One day, we'll look back on this as our night in jail. Boy, Doug would find this a real hoot. His goody-goody sister in the camp.
Grandma, this isn't funny. God, don't you take anything seriously?
Oh, we'll be out of here in no time.
We don't have money for the fine. We're gonna have to call Dad.
I'm sure he'll be joining us sooner rather than later.
You sure there isn't anyone you'd like to call?
In a moment, son. Right now, would you mind pointing me to that bathroom over there?
Well, Ms. Eason,
Call me Annie.
Annie, that's really just for police personnel only.
Well, now, you wouldn't want your mother using that, would you?
No, ma'am.
Could you find it in your heart to treat me like your mother just this time?
What the heck? This way.
Where's your partner?
Oh, he's out on a call.
Would you be a dear and make sure it's clean? I have a thing about bathrooms.
Sure. Yep, looks okay to me there, Annie.
Let's go. Hella, Mildred Easton. It's now or never. Cross another one off life's to-do list.
She is missing. You don't understand. I don't know. She were at work. How long do we have to wait before we can file him? Hold on.
Thank you very much. I'm fine. Thank you. I'll walk you in. No, it's all right. You don't have to see me yet.
They said you were on Washington Street. What were you doing over there?
Well, just some shopping. I wanted some shoes. Did you eat?
There aren't any shoe stores on Washington Street.
Yeah, well, I got turned around and it got dark and I ended up on Washington Street. I'm gonna fix some lamb chops. Would you set the table? Sorry I worried you, Billy.
Why didn't you call? Huh?
I couldn't remember our number. Oh. Billy, I think there's something wrong with me.
My hand just as she wants them, with nothing in them.
Go faster there, to your room. Yes. Nasty beast. I am aware, Mr. Trenshaw, that you are not used to the manners of good society, and that alone will excuse the impertinence of which you have been guilty.
Don't know the manners of good society, huh? Well, I guess I know enough to turn you inside out, old gal. You psychologizing old man crap.
Six Sigma Tyrannus! South is avenged! Stop that
Down there. On the ice, Captain.
What? Good God. He's alive. Get him on board.
Elizabeth, no!
Where am I? You're aboard the Prometheus out of Archangel.
Would you have the kindness to tell me where you are bound?
We're on a voyage to discover a northern passage to the east. I'm Robert Walton, captain of this expedition. Here, drink this soup. You'll be safe in our care.
No one is safe. Not while he is out there. You have seen him, haven't you?
A large man on a sledge. Easy.
Please. Help me find him. Before he murders again.
Murders?
I reckon any man can father a child.
I reckon so.
Takes a man with responsibility. Stay around and be a good daddy. Man has to respect a woman.
What are you trying to say, Keaton?
I'm asking if you'll marry me, Christine.
I'm tired of playing around. You pick up that gun.
Go ahead. Pick it up. You got no argument with that tape that don't include me.
Put the gun down, Thurman. It's between Tate and me.
It's yours now. hill. You wanna take me home?
Sir, half my men are down. Most of the rest are wounded. The left is too thin, sir.
How are we fixed for ammunition?
It's almost gone.
Sir, we're running out. We don't have much left to shoot with. Some of the boys got nothing at all.
Sir, what do we do for ammunition?
Sir, my boys have Brett muskets and they're firing back with them.
Sir, we ought to pull out.
No, we can't do that.
We can't hold them again, sir. You know that.
Well, if we don't, they go on by and over the hill and the whole flank caves in.
Sir, here they come.
Well, we can't run away. And if we stay here, we can't shoot. So let's fix bayonets. We'll have the advantage of moving down the hill. They gotta be tired, the Revs. They gotta be close to the end if we are. So fix bayonets. Ellis, wait, Ellis, you take the left wing, I'll take the right. I want a right wheel forward of the whole regiment.
What, you mean charge?
Yes, but here's what we do. We're going to charge swinging down the hill. Just like we pulled back this left side of the regiment, now we're going to swing it down. We swing like a door. We're gonna sweep them down the hill just as they come up. Understand? Does everybody understand?
Yes, sir.
Okay, Ellis, you take the left wing, and when I give the command, I want the whole regiment to go forward, swinging down to the right.
All right, sir. Fine.
Move.
Don't you go.
You and me. We had a time.
We did.
It was good.
Oh, yeah. So good.
Cover me now. Remember me alive. It's okay. It's okay.
There were 9 clips there. 4 of them were Hallmark movies, and 4 of them were for TNT, and there was 1 feature. I'm just going to say a couple things quickly about those. James Dean, the dilemma is how do you cast someone to play a movie icon? We had a talent search. After hundreds of video auditions and in-person auditions, we chose James Franco. This was his first movie as a lead actor, he won the Golden Globe for Best Actor. So he had been in TV shows, but he had never done a movie before as a lead actor, and basically started his career. Annie's Point, Betty White, what can I say? Wonderful to work with. Door to Door, it did win 6 Emmys. It also won the Peabody Award, Critics' Choice Award. Ironically, Helen Mirren, who was brilliant, was nominated for a Golden Globe and other nominations, but never won anything. The Day Lincoln Was Shot. This was not based on Jim Bishop's popular book from the 60s, I believe, which the Lincoln scholars all panned for not being well researched. But it was a great movie title, so we bought the book, and then we wrote our own script. I hired the best-known Lincoln scholar, William Hanchett, as our advisor, and I called him all the time. He was a big help to us. Frankenstein, I'm very proud of this one. It was recognized by Mary Shelley scholars as the best Frankenstein film ever made because it closely follows the book, including Victor Frankenstein's childhood. And we shot it in Slovakia and Norway. Then there were 2 Westerns that were both for Hallmark, and they don't do Westerns anymore, but a few years ago they did. So the first one, Trail to Hope Rose with Lou Diamond Phillips, and the second one, Aces and Eights, which was based on a 40-year-old script written for Clint Eastwood, but it was never produced. And then Ernie Borgnine, one of my all-time favorite actors, was almost 90 years old when he did that scene where we put a squib on him and basically shot him. And he brought his own stuntman, who was 88, and his stuntman did the fall there, and then there was another scene where he gets yanked off of a horse, 88 years old, and he did a great job. You Know My Name, the last one. This was based on a true story, tragedy of an old Western hero, Marshal Bill Tillman from Oklahoma, who comes out of retirement to fight organized crime. Another brilliant performance by Sam Elliott, who I think is often underrated as an actor. When I was putting this reel together, I found out it's really difficult to find decent copies of anything I've done in the last 10 years, as well as some before that. Many of my personal favorites are not on this reel. Why? Because piracy protections by the copyright owners are tougher than ever. I was not even given a copy of many movies I produced in the last few years for fear it would fall into the wrong hands. The key phrase these days is control of content. It's a brave new world we live in. The big players today were not even contenders 10 years ago. Netflix, Amazon Prime, Hulu, YouTube are the new monsters. Cable systems are in jeopardy, losing 10% of their subscribers per year. Companies, studios, and networks have become parts of conglomerates in order to survive. AT&T just merged with Time Warner in order to compete with the big players, and we used to think they were the big players. Why did they merge? Because delivery systems need content. In 1985, my old boss, Ted Turner, was called crazy when he bought MGM Studios. But the deal included the massive MGM library of films, plus all the pre-1948 Warner Brothers movies that they owned. When Ted started building more networks, TNT and TCM and even Cartoon Network, he had plenty of movies to play. Not many valued the importance of content back then. I began working for TNT a year after it first went on the air in 1988, and well over half of our programming was old MGM movies. We gradually produced more movies to replace them. By the time Ted started Turner Classic Movies in 1994, He moved all the old movies over to TCM. Meanwhile, we were making high-budget, quality movies in miniseries at TNT, as were HBO and Showtime, not to sell advertising, but to attract and build an audience. I believe the decade of the 1990s was the golden age of television movies. Ted Turner was very enthusiastic about making great movies. He called me his general because I was the in-house producer of all his passion projects, which were mostly Civil War movies. He wanted them to be as historically accurate as possible, which was a passion that I shared. Much different from the rest of Hollywood. But later, after our merger with Time Warner, our new bosses wanted to make TV series and dump the movies. In 2002, all of us were laid off. In the last 5 years, Netflix has used Ted's old model for content, except on steroids. Build a massive cash flow from profits of their movie subscription service, and then invest billions in new movies and TV series. Controlling the marketplace is based on how much content you have, at least for now. Other companies and networks must compete by increasing their output at a higher quality in order to compete. In 2018, the amount of scripted TV series passed the 500 mark. Over 500 TV series. Binge watching is now commonplace in America. Just ask my daughter Carmen. TV critics are in crisis. Even if they never sleep, there is no way to view every series they're required to write about. But the amount of high-quality TV series available today has made this era the golden age of the television series. In any case, it's a good time to work in production. There has never been more employment. Hallmark Channel alone is making 100 movies a year, and 36 of those will play this Christmas. Indie features are also coming back. I now work for Mission Pictures, which is currently developing a dozen features, some of them faith-based. Last spring, they released I Can Only Imagine, which cost $7 million to make. The US box office came in at $83 million, and Netflix will pay another $12 million to play it. Not bad for a little Christian movie. I'm often asked, what does a producer do? The short answer is everything. In TV, they are often the boss of the director. There are many kinds of producers: exec producer, associate producer, line producer, etc. I'm usually called simply producer, the one who is actually running the production. My credit usually reads produced by. There are times when I've never even met the other producers because I'm the one on the set every day and they are not. I'm not the one who raises the financing or makes the network deal. I am merely the hired hand, and that's what I like, dealing with the day-to-day financial production and creative issues of the show, dealing with actors, crew, director, set construction, props. It's a freelance world I'm in, and for 15 years I made bunches of little Hallmark movies with an average budget of only $1.5 to $2 million. I suppose I could have produced a crime drama TV series instead and made more money, and at some point the Hallmark movies all start looking the same. But I am tired of all the violence on television, and many people tell me the same thing. I'm very happy doing what I do, even when I have to work the usual 80-hour weeks. There is no more enjoyable job than making a movie, and my crew, right down to the interns, is a family that enjoys creating something together. It is the most collaborative art form. 25 to 200 people with very diverse skills combine their varied talents trying to make something special. Which leads me to a subject dear to my heart, mentoring. I once heard a TV executive say, if you can't find a mentor who thinks you are the greatest thing since sliced bread, you will have trouble succeeding. When I was a theater student here, I took the only cinema class the college had. One night, sitting in the alumni hall basement editing my little movie, I suddenly realized I wanted film production to be my career. As a senior, I interned for Dr. Griswold, our anthropology professor, who had built a small film studio in his barn. About the time I graduated, he received a grant to make educational films for the deaf with Dr. McKay Vernon. He hired me for the summer to shoot, run sound, edit, even write and direct a little. But when that ended, I floundered, not knowing how to find film work. The college had no mentoring program then, and no one to give me advice about how to make a career out of film production. I worked for a tree trimming company, and I managed my father's service station for 3 years. Finally, I made the leap into the dark, moving to New York, where I ended up doing freelance crew work. And 5 years after that, I moved to Los Angeles to find work as a production manager. But I was not blessed with my own mentor until I was 38. Producer Nick Lombardo hired me to work as location manager on one TV movie called Go Toward the Light. I had fallen on hard times and was no longer finding work as a production manager. Frankly, I was a terrible location manager. Shortly after we wrapped, I was deeply disillusioned about my failing dream career. I decided to get out, start over, and do something completely different. My wife and I moved to San Diego and began fixing up houses and selling them. But Nick Lombardo never lost touch with me. During that time, he became the first head of production for TNT. One day, he called me in San Diego and hired me to go babysit a small movie in Utah. The director thought I was the network's spy. Then Nick hired me to work on a bigger movie in communist Hungary, which proved to be very, very challenging in many ways. Apparently, I passed the test. The next time I drove up to LA from San Diego, I went to his office. I said, "I'm thinking about moving back to LA." He stood up immediately, shut the door, and then hired me as his director of production. 2 years later, I was promoted to vice president of production, which lasted over 10 years. When I was laid off, he helped me get started as a producer of Hallmark movies. Recently, I asked him, why did he do all that for me? After all, he had only seen me work one 8-week job as a bad location manager. He said, "I thought you deserved a shot at working above the line. I saw something in you." That's how I feel about the students here at McDaniel. I see something in them, enthusiasm and talent, and the desire to find a way to express it. When I was at TNT in the 1990s, I wanted to help McDaniel theater students figure out their careers. I remembered how hard it was for me not having anyone to talk to. Many students called me at the TNT office in LA, and we'd have long conversations. One graduate even moved to LA, where I was able to get him his first job on a big miniseries. Then, 10 years ago, I started coming to campus every semester to speak in classes and mentor students in the brand new cinema department. I can't say enough great things about the cinema department here. It is a little mecca on the top floor of Lewis Hall, a place where I used to cut open frogs in biology lab. And I hated it. But Westminster is a long way from Hollywood, so I try to help the students gain some perspective. We started an internship program where 1 or 2 students were chosen to come each summer to see what it's like to work on a movie set in LA. 2 of my former interns are now living and working in LA, and others are working around the country. And I know there's at least a couple of them here tonight. Where are you? Oh, right in the front row. Of course, film production happens everywhere now. So each semester, I have half-hour mentoring meetings with students to help them define their career goals and find the direction they want to go in, whether it's in Baltimore, New York, Atlanta, or even Westminster. I'm very proud of the cinema graduates, and I'm always suggesting to other alumni, find a way to share your talents with the students here. Nowadays, there are real and excellent mentoring programs here. Let them know you want to be involved, and you can pass on the benefit of your experience and guidance to very worthy McDaniel students. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim, and it's great to have you here. And you folks came up with really great questions tonight. We'll never get them all covered, so you have to stay after so you get a chance to talk to Jim in person if we don't get a chance to talk about this. So you talked about being down in the basement and the chance to work with Griswold. Is that really where the start of your desire to be in the entertainment business came, or did you have that before then?
I think that's just where I realized it. You know, when I was in high school, I was in a lot of plays, and I decided to get into theater. And but I realized later that I'd been watching movies intently since I was very young. So, but it wasn't until that like kind of defining moment, you know, editing that film and getting all excited about putting the film together, that's when I realized that was the, you know, the light bulb went off.
Mm-hmm. So you had no job before you went to New York, no film job at all?
Other than working for Dr. Griswold, I did actually go to Memphis State University in the grad film program because I wanted to work with a professor of film studies who was a documentary filmmaker that I greatly respected. And it was a very small program, and I figured I was going to be right there working with him directly, and it would be much better than going to a big film school.
Right.
I packed up and drove all the way to Memphis and arrived and went into the dean's office, and he said, "Better sit down because Craig Leak just took a job in New York." So that was, you know, after one semester at Memphis State and getting straight A's, I knew something was wrong. So I moved back to Maryland, and then I looked for work for a long, long time, and it really needed a mentor so badly, and had no one to call upon.
So when you got your first paycheck or pay in the industry, what were you doing? What job on the film?
Well, the first movie I made in New York was an indie feature called The Astrologer, which is a really horrible movie. I mean, I did a lot of indie features in New York, and most of them were pretty bad, and one of them was called Dawn of the Mummy. And I worked as a swing grip electric. Actually, because I had been a tree climber, little did I know that was going to help me get film work, because I took my climbing equipment to New York, and they said, "Oh, you can rig lights in trees." So suddenly I was an electrician and a grip. And I did that for a while and worked as an assistant cameraman for almost 5 years before I moved to LA.
So how did you make the connections? And particularly, I asked that question from the point of view of so many students are interested in going in the industry. How do you find someone that can give you that kind of a break?
That's a really tough thing to answer. Like, I obviously struggled with it myself until, you know, I had that, you know, it was a blessing that I met Nick Lombardo, you know, and it kind of came out of the blue when it happened. But, I mean, there's lots of ways to try to network, and it was different then than it is now. There's more ways to do it now online and you know, through now mentoring programs and internships are much more prominent than they were back then. Internships were very rare back then. And the other thing that I found in New York is that most of my work came from people on my level. We all networked with each other. So if somebody got a lead for a job, they would tell me, and then I would go and I'd try to get on the same crew, or they would recommend me. So often it was through your friends or your contacts in the industry.
So when you were starting, New York and LA, that was really it. I mean, there was not much of a bridge. You helped build the Atlanta film industry, but...
Atlanta now is #2 in the U.S. They've replaced New York as #2. So that's the new one. But at that time, it was very much centered in L.A., And New York had it as well, but when I moved to LA, I realized there was many more opportunities there than New York. And that's all, it's changed a lot. There's probably still more LA jobs than anywhere else, but it depends what you're looking for, you know, and Atlanta is certainly boomed. It's booming now. There's stages all over the place down there, and there's a lot of new productions starting up there. So I've often told a lot of students here, it's like, if you want to try a big city, maybe you want to try Atlanta. You know, it feels a little easier than going all the way to LA. And maybe it's a little less daunting than New York.
What led you to go from New York to LA?
Oh, I knew by then I wanted to be a producer, and nobody was giving me the chance. I was known for being a grip or an electric or a camera assistant, and people kept hiring me for that. And then when I would say, well, I want to be like an assistant production manager, or they weren't interested. So at some point, I just thought, you know what, I'm going to have to start over. I had one friend in LA, and he said, you need to come out here. And so, you know, I actually decided I was going to take a trip to San Francisco. I'd never been to the West Coast before. And I had friends in San Francisco. And he said, well, when you come out here, come to LA for a day or two. So I came out, and he said, and before I left, he said, bring your assistant camera tools with you. Okay. So when I landed, I literally went straight to my first job in LA, which was for a new TV series called That's Incredible. And all those shoots were basically one-day shoots. The first one was shooting somebody jumping out of an airplane wearing a straitjacket. You know, and he can't.
I remember that show.
Can't pull the ripcord until he can get out of the straitjacket. But anyway, I ended up going to San Francisco for one day, and the rest of my trip I was in LA working for this show. So I thought, this is it. I'm going back to New York, and I had a couple of commitments for jobs, and in 2 months I moved out to LA. And 2 weeks after I moved out, I got a job as an assistant production manager. And the reason I got the job was because I knew equipment, and the production manager didn't. Needed somebody who had worked on crews who knew all the lights and the cameras and everything.
So I'm going to ask you two questions that sound very close to each other, but I think they're actually very different questions. So you can take them either way. So how hard is it to make a movie, and how hard is it to get a movie made?
Oof. They're both hard. But for me, making the movie is the easy part. I mean, it's not easy, but it's a routine, and as over time you'll learn how the routine works, and you know, often instinctually, what you have to deal with next in order to get the movie made. And part of being a producer is, you know, a producer. I discovered the main thing about being a producer was you just have to be there, because the problems come to you. And you need to be the problem solver. But compared to, you know, now I'm working for a company that's developing feature films. We got a couple that look really promising that I think we'll be shooting early next year. But it's so frustrating for me because there's lots of meetings, lots of rewrites, lots of discussions about who should direct this, who should act in this, and it just goes on and on and on. And it's like, and this is normal. It's just new to me because I was never so deeply into the development end. So that to me is more of an unknown. And there's so many films that get developed and never get made.
So when you were working, let's say for Hallmark or for TNT, talk a little bit about the process of getting a movie made. So what came first, a script, a director, a concept? How did that usually work?
Well, it was different at the two places. At TNT, when they were trying to get started, they were trying to attract talent so that people would actually tune into their little network. They found it was pretty good to go to big name actors who had special projects that they could never get made. So, you know, we went to Ed Harris, and Ed Harris wanted to make Riders of the Purple Sage, and as an example. And once you started developing stuff like that, then the talent was attracted to it, or the talent led us to the material. Hallmark is a much different process. It's basically you developing the stuff and pitching it to Hallmark and getting them involved. And the first company I worked for doing Hallmark movies at the time actually had an exclusive contract to do all the Hallmark movies, every one of them. And that was through Robert Halmy Sr., who actually owned a big part of Hallmark. And he also owned part of the production company. So it was a monopoly, basically. And over time, that started eroding and falling apart, and Halmy left and was kind of dumped from the whole scene and everything. But it made it a lot easier. You know, basically, it's like, this is telling Hallmark, we want you to make this movie. And often they would just say, okay. And there was way more variety then. And now Hallmark is, you know, this is something that there's 300 channels out there. So each network has to deeply define what you're going to see on their network. So Hallmark has narrowed the window of the kinds of movies that they make, as has Lifetime and all the other networks for that matter. So basically they have their own Bible that says, this is what we want it like this, we don't want it like this, and you know, and we had rules that they've gradually changed. It's like, usually there's a man or a woman in the beginning of a Hallmark movie who, whose husband or wife died 3 years ago. And, you know, and we used to laugh because, you know, we get a new script and we go, let's see how long ago it was. I had one script where they had died 5 years ago, and then we got a note from Hallmark, change that to 3 years. That's the ideal window for looking for new love, you know? And divorce, and nobody could be divorced. I mean, that's changed. You know, now they can be divorced, but back then,
3 years ago.
No, this is, yeah. Now they're edgy.
One of the things, the times that I've gotten to see you at work on the set or see the films being produced, it's just struck me is the repurposing of sets, the repurposing of everything, you know, and it becomes interesting to sort of watch the film and say, oh, I know that was there and that was here.
Right.
The sort of formulaic part. So who figures that out? I mean, is that the producer figuring out that?
That's the producer working with the production designer. And we're the first two people on, well, and the location manager, we're the first 3 people on a show. This is usually weeks before a director is hired. And we sit down, usually it's while we're shooting another one. At some point we go, okay, here's the next script. You know, it was a bit of a factory. And we'd sit down and go, okay, well, we could use that set on stage 2, and you know, that used to be, you know, a hotel lobby, and we can turn it into, you know, a wedding place. You know, so that we can do the wedding in there, or we turn into a restaurant, and we would shift a few walls around, and then sometimes we would, you know, we would always paint, we'd always decorate it differently. So hopefully nobody ever thought it was the same set. But when you're making movies that quickly and don't have a lot of prep or a lot of money, you have to repurpose everything. And you know, if we had to build a new set, that was like, well, that would take a month. You know, we don't have time for that. You know, plus they wouldn't give us the money to do it. Occasionally we did build sets, but often it was a matter of redoing another set. And how creative can you be doing that? You know, I became very creative doing that, and it was fun to figure it out. It's like, we only have, you know, this much money. How can we do this?
What's the shortest amount of time or the longest amount of time you've ever spent making a film, a feature-length film?
Oof. Well, the longest, I guess, was a long time ago. I worked on Jaws 3D, and I worked on that for 3 years.
Wow.
And just doing 3D tests, you know, before the movie was ever made. I mean, I was doing other things for the same company, but, you know, 3D was a very imperfect system then. It probably still is a little bit, but definitely then. And so we would do different kinds of tests. We would change the screen. We would paint screens silver to see how the 3D effect turned out. And I mean, it was endless. It's just like, are we ever going to make this movie? But that was 3 years. I mean, I've had projects. I had a Hallmark movie that was it's actually one of my favorites, personal favorites. And we made the movie, and then our boss decided he didn't like the movie, and he didn't want to hand it over to Hallmark. So it sat on the shelf for 2.5 years. And then finally, you know, he said, okay, all right, we'll give him that movie. You know, and the funny thing is in that movie, there's a crane shot, where it's a service station scene. The crane shot comes down and goes past the sign that tells the price per gallon. And by the time we showed the movie, the prices were so ridiculously low that you thought, this is an old movie. Why? And they say it's a premiere.
What's the most money you've ever had to produce a film with?
25 million is probably the most. That was several of the TNT projects were there, which was really huge for television.
You spoke earlier about the changes that have happened technologically. What do you think the biggest change in your industry has been in the time you've been in it?
Well, the fact that it's digital is huge. You know, the fact that you're shooting on digital and delivering on digital, and yet digital quality continues to change. So you can't borrow something from a movie you made 5 years ago because the picture quality isn't as good as the new picture quality is. At some point, we actually started like, oh, we need to get a stock shot from an old movie. It's like, well, it'll have to be film. You have to go back to when we were shooting film, because then you can convert that to anything you want. So that, and the result of that being special effects. Effects have changed enormously, enormously. I mean, in some of my, maybe one of my last films at TNT, you know, we would buy an effect shot. It would cost $50,000, and it was all rendered for film. And the things that we did in those shots are like so easy now, and would cost, you know, $1,500, $2,000.
Who would you rather spend your time with if you have to pick? Directors, actors, or other producers?
Well, it depends who they are. I have to say, you know, most people are nice people. I have to say, whether they're a star or a producer or a director. But, you know, there's people with big egos and that try to push other people around, and they're the ones that you have to deal with.
You've worked with some pretty big name people, and I won't ask you to pick a favorite since we're recording this. So maybe you could talk about some distinctive individuals that you've enjoyed the chance to work with.
Well, by saying enjoyed, that means not the people that I had the most trouble with, right? So I'm not going to talk about those, maybe.
Right.
We can talk later at the reception. But in terms of actors, I mean, Sam Elliott was such a pleasure to work with. And I did 3 movies with him. Donald Sutherland I did 3 movies with. And he's quirky, and you know, if somebody smoked on the set sometime in the last week, he won't go on the set because he's very sensitive and allergic to tobacco. But he's a good guy. He's a really good guy, extremely professional. Comes and does his job and elevates the production. As far as directors, one of my favorite experiences was working with John Frankenheimer, who was someone that I admired greatly when I was a teenager, you know, because of some of the great movies he made in the 1960s that I later saw on television. But, and he was a tough character to deal with for sure, but I really loved him, you know, and he was, you know, I've worked with several directors like that. Mark Rydell, who directed James Dean, has a very long list. And Mark, by the way, actually knew James Dean in New York, at that time. In fact, our writer for James Dean also wrote for live television. He was a very old man when he wrote the script, and but he also knew James Dean. So, you know, it's Nicholas Roeg was another one I loved working with, who a lot of people today I don't even think they know who Nicholas Roeg is anymore. But he was a very big director in the 70s and did some pretty unusual films. But it was a great pleasure working with him.
Is there somebody that you're dying to work with that you're just like, man, I would give anything to get a chance to work with them?
There's a lot of people I'd love to work with. I can't think of anyone in particular that stands out. I mean, when I was a kid, I idolized Gregory Peck, you know, and I wanted to work with him or to meet him and everything. I actually did get a chance to meet him finally. And he was a complete gentleman, and, you know, I said, the reason I'm in this industry is partly because of you, because, you know, I admired the works that you did. And he says, well, I have one question for you. Did you make the right decision?
You seem to really fancy the Western. Where did that come from?
Well, I mean, a lot of the Westerns were kind of thrown at me, but I loved doing the Westerns. And when I was a kid, Westerns were big on television. You know, a lot of Warner Brothers Westerns were coming out, Maverick and Rawhide and things like that, you know, that I really enjoyed. And it probably came from that, I think.
Well, you've done a lot of films that have historical basis. You talked a bit about hiring the top historians or whatever. Do you, when you're making a historical film, like a film about Lincoln or Gettysburg, how much do you feel this obligation to stick to the historical facts? And how much do you say, this is a much better story? I mean, I really would rather go this direction, particularly now in a post-factual world.
Exactly. It is always a balancing act, but I have found from as far back as I can remember that people tend to take the shortcut and say, let's just do it this way. It's not fact, but let's do it this way. Spielberg did it a lot in his Lincoln movie, you know, which, you know, and he got a lot of criticism for it. You know, it's like, and it was not necessary because the drama was still there. But to answer your question, I can give you an example. It's like, I was really passionate about it. I did everything I could to make it historically accurate. But obviously, we don't know really what people were saying. We don't even know what they sounded like in the 1860s. There were no recordings that we can go back. I had 4 historical advisors on Gettysburg, and the last one was chosen by the reenactors, who turned out to be the most valuable one, because he knew all the insignias and all the uniforms, and he knew, you know, the military procedures, but he also knew the language. And he went through the Gettysburg script that had already been reviewed by 3 other historians, and he said, well, the dialogue here doesn't work. I mean, it's like, look, this general says okay. It's like, okay did exist. Okay came into existence in the 1830s, but it didn't mean the same thing then. So you have to say all right or yes. Those were the kind of notes he gave us through the whole script. We had a scene in Gettysburg where at the end of the second night of the battle, General Longstreet goes to see General Lee, and they have a conversation about what's going to happen what happened that day and what's going to happen the next day. That conversation never took place. But what we do have, they never saw each other that night, but they sent messages back and forth. And we had the messages. So we know what their conversation was in messages, and we turned that into a dialogue scene because that's more dramatic.
There's been a lot of talk about diversity in the filmmaking industry. Do you find things are getting better and greater opportunities are there for people who are working in the industry of color, for women? Where do you think we're headed in terms of opportunity?
It's still not there yet. It's improved. It's improved a lot in the last couple of years, especially, you know, with the Me Too movement and these other movements that are really helping. We've made an active effort to try to hire minorities. I think some of the problems happen on the ground level. It's like a grip trying to, you know, African American or a Latino grip trying to get into the union and maybe not getting the opportunity to work as a trainee or something. It's still going on all levels, but more and more, especially with women, I think there's a much greater consciousness now about, can we hire a woman director? You know, is this possible? Is there somebody that works for the show who's a woman? But there's still a long way to go.
Well, you couldn't major in film when you were a student, we can major in cinema if you're a student now. But is there something distinctive you think about studying cinema in a liberal arts environment versus going to a film school to do it? And is it better, different? What would you advise?
In some ways it's better, in some ways it's different. My liberal arts education has affected me my whole life. And I don't think I really became conscious of it until I was in my 50s. And then I started to realize, it's like when I'm working on a movie and, you know, it's like, I remember something that happened, you know, that I learned in German class or, you know, something, you know, history certainly. But, and it's not just it's not just that, it's the consciousness that, you know, evolves out of having a liberal arts education. It's the way I think your brain is shaped, you know, to respond to it. In terms of film, there are schools that you go to. If you want to become a director of photography, you are probably better off not coming to McDaniel. You know, there's not a lot of equipment. There's not an active cinematography program. I mean, you do get a chance to shoot, et cetera. But if you want to learn story, if you want to create a script, if you want to get an overall view of the world of production and, or shall we say, cinema, this is the place to be.
Well, we're delighted this is the place you picked for your undergraduate degree, and equally delighted that you have been giving back for the past several years to our students by mentoring them, creating opportunities for them in LA. I know you've opened up your house for them to live in. I mean, you've certainly created many opportunities for folks. And so your alma mater, Western Maryland, is extraordinarily proud of you. And I wanted to end today by saying that you need a McDaniel diploma to hang along with your Western Maryland diploma. And I happen to know a guy who can put those in tubes. So,
oh, wow.
Can you join me in thanking Jim Wilberger for being here and for being McDaniel alumni?
Thank you. Pleasure. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for coming out.
So I know you have a lot of friends, both friends from the past and new friends to meet tonight, so I encourage all of you, there's something to drink in the back, something to eat back there. Hang around for a while, chat with Jim. We really appreciate your being here tonight. Thanks so much.
Hi, Sarah. How are you?